Watch right now on the Front News Project. A new invasion from Belarus. Is the enemy ready, and how will the Ukrainian forces respond? China is fighting against Ukraine. Chinese soldiers in Putin's army. Exclusive details. And also explosions across Russia, blasts at the largest oil refineries. Fiery, hot, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. Lukashenko just won't calm down. The threat of invasion from Belarus against Ukraine is steadily increasing. Putin is gradually exerting full control over the Belarusian army. What exactly could this situation mean for Mustachio Grigorich? And above all, for the population of his country? An attempt by the occupiers to cross the Belarusian-Ukrainian border? We'll tell you about it now.
Large-scale nuclear exercises began across Russia on May 19th. More than 60,000 military personnel have been involved, including the strategic missile forces, the Northern and Pacific fleets, and long-range aviation. Belarus is also participating in the nuclear exercises,
with the aim of increasing the readiness of the armed forces to use various modern means of destruction, including specialized tactical munitions. Under the leadership of the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, the First Deputy Minister of Defense of the Republic of Belarus, training has begun for military units in the combat use of nuclear weapons and nuclear support. The training is a scheduled event as part of the Union States' preparations, is not directed against third countries, and does not pose a threat to security in the region. Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Belarus.
Before the full-scale invasion, exercises were also conducted on the territory of Belarus, and similar statements were made by the Ministry of Defense. Everyone clearly remembers where the invasion began. Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately responded to the start of the exercises.
The strategic deployment of Russian tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus and the joint nuclear exercises of the two dictatorships are an extraordinary and unprecedented challenge to the architecture of global security. The elitization of Belarus not only undermines trust in international law, but also finally turns Minsk into an accomplice in Russia's nuclear blackmail. The brazenness of Moscow and Minsk, who have knowingly crossed all red lines, cannot go unanswered and must be met with a tough consolidated response and systematic deterrence of both regimes by the Euro-Atlantic community and the entire world. Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Russian tactical nuclear weapons were deployed on the territory of Belarus in mid-2023. And since then, Russia has increasingly threatened with this weapon and conducted various exercises. This is one of the elements of intimidation not only against Ukraine, but all of Europe.
In Belarus, well, at least as far as these current reports can be trusted, and we must acknowledge there are no other reports available right now, an entire Iskander missile division equipped with nuclear warheads has been positioned. Furthermore, 10 specialized aircraft, which are fully capable of carrying and deploying tactical nuclear gravity bombs, have now been officially deployed to the region as well. The government in Moscow is currently exerting heavy pressure on Minsk so that the Belarusian armed forces would take a direct and active part in the ongoing war against Ukraine. In other words, to launch a new military attack against Ukraine.
Shortly before the nuclear exercises, Belarus closed forests in 19 border districts of the country to visitors. Most of the closed districts are located along the borders with Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania. One of the most important targets for an invasion could be the Rivne nuclear power plant. Putin lacks sufficient forces of his own, which is why he is trying to draw the Belarusian army into the war against Ukraine. But Lukashenko understands everything perfectly well.
As I see it, Lukashenko absolutely does not want this. He is fully and clearly aware that, first of all, any military attempt or provocation to invade Ukraine would inevitably mean the swift and total destruction of the Belarusian army.
All the roads on the border with Belarus from the Ukrainian side have long been mined and are well covered by fire, so for Lukashenko's army, it would be a one-way ticket. The exercises and threats are more a psychological tactic than actual actions. The Ukrainian armed forces are currently monitoring all movements of Russian and Belarusian troops, so there is no reason to panic.
But despite the fact that there are currently not many Russian troops on Belarusian territory, Russia can use this area at any moment by transferring additional forces there. There is already a certain amount of blackmail going on regarding the presence of nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory. Of course, the threat in Belarus is real, and we must be prepared for the development of any situation.
Potentially, Russia could resort to a provocation in northern Ukraine and drag the Belarusian army into this situation in order to force Ukrainian troops to be deployed there. But for that, the aggressor needs a force and resources which they currently do not have.
And now let's move to the much-suffering Pokrovsk direction of the active front. The hostile enemy army's bloody rampage continues. And here, in the Pokrovsk direction, the occupiers tried to advance 24 times. Near the settlements of Novaya Shakova, Zatishchek, Nikonorovka, Rodinskaya, Toretskaya, Novo-Alexandrovka, Grishina, Kotlina, Kamenka, Sergeyevka, Udachnaya, Molodetskaya, and Novopavlovka. One battle is still ongoing. China is now openly fighting against Ukraine. Evidence has emerged that several hundred soldiers from the PRC are already fighting on the side of the occupiers. And Putin's soldiers are currently being trained in military skills in China, first and foremost in the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. Exclusive details in the report by my colleagues.
China has secretly trained hundreds of Russian occupiers for the ongoing war.
As is tradition, we dedicate one of the integral components of the comprehensive partnership.
European intelligence claims that we are talking about approximately 200 servicemen who underwent training at the end of 2025 in China.
According to 3 separate European intelligence agencies and documents reviewed by Reuters. At the end of last year, the Chinese People's Liberation Army conducted secret training sessions for about 200 Russian servicemen on Chinese territory. And some of those individuals later returned to actively participate in the ongoing combat operations in Ukraine.
This information indicates a much deeper involvement of China in the conflict. As the publication writes, the training took place at military facilities in Beijing and Nanjing. But Russia naturally denies this.
Complete nonsense. We have nothing to learn from our Chinese comrades. In fact, they are very eager to learn from us. In
this document, it is also mentioned that Chinese servicemen are being trained at Russian training grounds. The main area of focus was on the operational use of drones, countering drones, electronic warfare, army aviation, and the actions of armored units. And the program itself was formalized by a Russian-Chinese agreement signed in the summer of 25.
The Russian forces, much like we do ourselves, have extensive expertise in conducting modern warfare. This is a significant asset. The Chinese, on the other hand, the Chinese can generously share and distribute their advanced technologies. Technologies for producing a wide variety of sophisticated weapons, equipment, and a vast array of other critical technologies, areas where the Russians have unfortunately and hopelessly fallen far behind.
This was mutually beneficial since hundreds of Chinese military personnel were supposed to undergo training in Russia. The mutual agreement also prohibited any mention of the visits in the media and the sharing of information with third parties.
According to the report, Chinese military officers are going to Russia for training. The Chinese military has not had any real combat experience since 1979, when they briefly fought a border war against Vietnam, which did not end very well for China. But Russia does have significant experience thanks to the ongoing war in Ukraine and many other recent wars. China is now actively preparing for a potential military conflict in East Asia, possibly regarding the island of Taiwan.
Some of the military personnel have already been identified among Russian drone operators in occupied Crimea and the Zaporizhzhia region.
Included among the military personnel trained in China were also specialized representatives of Rubicon, Russia's elite drone unit, whose presence often significantly influences the strategic course of events in Ukraine's frontline regions. And
no matter how much Beijing traditionally claims a neutral position or that China stands for a peaceful resolution to the war, in practice, the reality is quite the opposite.
The relationship between Putin and Xi Jinping has been close for many years. There is cooperation in the economic sphere. Their trade now amounts to about $240 billion. They are also getting closer in the military sphere. China supplies Russia with dual-use equipment for the needs of the war against Ukraine. But this latest report, if it is to be believed, and of course one must be cautious since it is still based on leaks, claims that China is now directly trading with Russian military personnel. At the
Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they stated that this did not happen and the same old tune started playing again. The country maintains objectivity and an active stance and asks not to fuel confrontation.
The nation of Russia has increasingly become one of those specific types of financial assets that these two major players are actively attempting to utilize this situation in their ongoing geopolitical struggle against each other. By and large, neither the United States nor the People's Republic of China has any genuine requirement for a powerful Russia. Both sides only need it as a kind of raw materials appendage, and it is for this raw materials appendage that they are competing.
But in reality, China is doing everything it can to help the Russians through barter.
This could be official military cooperation. It's something similar to what North Korea did with Russia when North Korea sent more than 10,000 military personnel to the Kursk region. This is a new level of interstate cooperation. However, officially, there have been no Chinese troops on the front lines in Ukraine.
After Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Moscow and Beijing greatly increased military cooperation.
Of course, the Chinese government will deny this. The Chinese government officially claims that it is not participating in the war in any military way. But if we are to believe this report, it is indeed involved and is helping the Russians master these new technologies, which are provided by China itself.
China officially declares its neutrality, but in reality, it provides economic, diplomatic, and technological support to Russia in its war against Ukraine.
It was a successful, productive, and eventful effort. During
Putin's most recent visit to Beijing, the country signed about 40 documents, but it is unknown how many of them were classified. What other kinds of cooperation? What else could they offer each other? And how many more secrets are there between Xi Jinping and his obedient Russian servant?
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Huliaipol front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. On the Huliaipol front, there were 19 attacks in the areas of Novo-Zaporizhzhia, Dobropilia, Raibne, Żeleznodorodne, Cvetkove, Vozdvizhevka, Verkhnaya Tersa, Starukrainka, Huliaipolskie, and Cherivne. One of these attacks is still ongoing. At the same time, Putin's war criminals continue missile and drone strikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities. The number of wounded in Dnipro has risen to 28. Among them are 3 children, including a 5-month-old boy. The city endured a combined drone and missile attack that lasted more than 10 hours. More than 50 apartment buildings and private houses were damaged, as well as an educational institution and a mosque, and 3 hospitals. Our correspondent from KTSN, Olga Pavlovska, will tell and show you more about the aftermath.
Explosions one after another from Sunday evening until Monday morning. A strike hits the roof of a high-rise building in the city center. A fire broke out. Another strike hit a fireworks warehouse in the suburbs. A forced fireworks display lit up the night sky. After a swarm of drones and missiles, one strike hit a densely populated residential area. Fires broke out and rescuers evacuated people from blocked apartments. More than 27 people were injured, including 3 children, a 5-month-old baby, a 2-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old boy. The lives of the injured are not in danger.
There was an explosion and everything went flying. Explosions, everything was blown away. The windows flew out, the furniture, the doors, even the front doors were blown out. I got closer to the bathroom, and this tile, the top one, probably fell on the back of my head.
Tatiana was hiding in the hallway during the alert in her apartment on the 2nd floor. Her husband, who has limited mobility, stayed on the couch. He survived. Neighbors and rescuers helped the injured woman.
My husband is disabled, he uses 2 canes. He wouldn't have been able to move quickly. And this neighbor ran and called the rescuers. They pulled me out and quickly took me to the ambulance. And we drove fast because they were waiting. They said there will be another strike soon.
The hospital where Tatiana is being saved was also damaged during the massive attack. Patients and medical staff were not injured.
We felt every explosion. The opposing forces were specifically targeting people who were either unconscious or critically ill patients. Well over 100 people in this building are currently on ventilators.
Windows were blown out in 2 intensive care units, the clinic, the wards, and this is the hospital director's office. He managed to get down to the admissions department just in time.
Walls were pierced, piles of debris everywhere, and so I gathered these, you see? It was simply impossible to take them down, no matter how hard we tried. That is just the way they truly are, but honestly, that is not even the most frightening part of this situation. What is truly terrifying is when innocent lives are actually being taken away from us.
When lives are taken away, more than 50 houses were damaged, 2,000 windows were shattered. Irina, using a cane, carries a board to at least somehow cover the holes. During the attack, she took shelter in a bunker.
The children started screaming. Half-dressed people ran out from the building. The children and everyone else were crying. No blood was visible, but overall it was terrifying.
Kindergartens and gymnasiums have been destroyed, as well as shops, offices, and the post office. Employee Elena examines the destroyed branch.
But that's nothing. Everything burned down. Today people will lose their pensions. It was loud. Very...
A mosque strewn with glass destroyed. There were people here during the attack. Everyone was miraculously saved, says the regional imam, Nizami Mirzabekov. On the eve of the attack, there was actually a presentation for the elementary school here.
Inside were our employee Yunus, his pregnant wife, and parishioners. It was lucky that people had left, because on that day there were several dozen children and several dozen sisters, women, in the building. We will resume our work and continue to serve this community to bring good.
The consequences are still being dealt with. There is significant destruction in other districts of the region as well.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka fronts. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. On the Kramatorsk front, the enemy attacked once in the direction of Menkivka. The attack is still ongoing. On the Konstantinovka front, the invaders carried out 15 attacks toward the settlements of Konstantinovka, Prishchevka, Ilinovka, Ivanopole, Rusinyar, Stepanovka, and Toretskoye. Disturbing news from across the border. Of course, it's reassuring that they're worried, isn't it? After all, the Russian war criminals are worried about their own oil refineries. Russian public outlets report that the security situation around oil refining facilities has significantly deteriorated over the past 2 months. And there are no signs that the situation will improve. All the details are in our report.
There is yet another commotion in Russia. This time, everyone is in a frenzy over the situation surrounding the oil refineries. As they say, Ukrainian long-range sanctions are in action.
It is the country's oil that is the proverbial hidden needle of Koshchei, which, as a matter of fact, determines Russia's future.
Russians are especially anxious about the security around the oil refineries. This is reported by the Telegram channel Kremlin Snuffbox.
Sources in the government state that the security situation around oil refining facilities has significantly deteriorated over the past 2 months. And the trend since the beginning of the year is extremely troubling. The oil refineries continue to suffer. The supply of spare units has been exhausted or is nearly depleted. The units are complex and critical. And the attacks, unfortunately, continue, says the source.
At the same time, individuals with close ties to the Kremlin claim that a fuel shortage in Russia will be avoided, at least for the next few months.
However, this is a task that also falls to local authorities, who must already begin reducing consumption by non-critical enterprises. Civilians are advised not to stock up on fuel in advance in order to avoid a sharp increase in prices. However, under conditions of reduced production, increases in market prices are virtually inevitable.
Nevertheless, repeated precision strikes on Russian oil and gas infrastructure and sanctions pressure have already created serious problems for Russia's economy.
All the total revenue that Russia receives is derived primarily from oil. Oil, petroleum products, and to a lesser extent gas. These are what allow the Putin regime to exist, to buy weapons, to hire mercenaries, and to continue the war against Ukraine. And if, for example, Ukraine systematically targets Russian oil refining and oil transportation, which is what we are seeing now, then ultimately this will create a lot of problems for Russia. After all, this is fairly complex equipment, which is not so easy or simple to repair, and most importantly, it will require money. In other words, what is supposed to generate revenue will instead bring losses.
Just in the past few months alone, Russia has lost roughly 10% of its oil refining capacity.
In just these few months, that's a total reduction of about 10% of Russian oil refining. It is also important to note that Russian oil companies are being forced to shut down wells. This is even more significant. That's crucial. It's all clear, you see. To restore production at these wells, Russia needs to do significantly more than many other oil-producing countries, which shut down wells simply in response to market fluctuations. Russians can't do that. For them, losing production is truly very painful.
This is also due to the comprehensive pressure on Russia. The deficit of the Russian budget for the first 5 months of the year has already exceeded the figures Moscow had planned for the entire year. The Kremlin does have reserves to continue the war, but they are not unlimited.
Putin, of course, set aside money for the war, but certainly not enough to fight indefinitely. Every one of our retaliatory strikes, every step we take together with our partners, every step of pressure, all of this pushes Russia toward ending the war. Right now, they already have a significant number of regions in a state of bankruptcy, and Putin is leading Russia toward bankruptcy.
And Ukraine is not stopping there and continues to put pressure on the Russian economy and oil refining sector, and will keep going. And that's the right thing to do.
In Russia, the entire economy is essentially a few pipelines and a few dozen oil refineries. And all of them are large, all of them are huge, scattered across the entire territory of Russia. That is, it's impossible to fully cover them with air defense systems. If Ukraine systematically takes them out sooner or later, both the spare parts and the money for repairs will run out, and ultimately so will the Russian economy. Well, it won't exactly collapse, but a significant portion of its income will disappear. This is happening under conditions of a general crisis in that very economy where Putin has driven Russia.
President Volodymyr Zelensky, for his part, has already stated the effectiveness of Ukrainian long-range strikes on Russian territory. And he made it clear that Ukraine plans to intensify such strikes and has already approved the corresponding plans for June.
Today, I approved our long-range plans for June, and we must creatively develop Ukrainian long-range sanctions, which demonstrated their strength in May. I am grateful to our soldiers for their accuracy. And now we move to the Kupiansk and Lyman directions of the front. Yes, these are sacred targets for Putin and his entire entourage. Accordingly, the situation here is extremely tense. In the Kupiansk direction, the enemy carried out 3 assault actions towards Kurilivka, Kevsharivka and Novoplatonivka. One of these attacks is still ongoing. In the Lyman direction, the hostile enemy forces attacked twice towards Zarekny and Lyman. Okay, both of these attacks are still ongoing. Meanwhile, Ukraine is transitioning to an entirely new level in the technology war. This includes our own guided aerial bombs, new long-range missiles, and collaborative joint projects with Europe. The Ukrainian defense sector is rapidly increasing its capabilities, just like the war itself. It is forcing Ukraine to become one of the strongest producers of modern weaponry. We'll tell you about it right now.
Ukraine has created its own guided aerial bomb, and this is no longer just an experiment or a project on paper. According to Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, the bomb has passed all necessary tests and is ready for combat use. The development took 17 months of work by Ukrainian engineers. A project, it was implemented with the support of the Brave One platform, a government initiative focused on the development of military technologies. The main thing is that this is a completely Ukrainian development. It's not a copy of a Western or Russian weapon, but a system created for the realities of modern warfare. An ordinary
bomb, even dropped from a maximum altitude of 10 to 12 kilometers, can reach its target from a high-speed aircraft. Here, however, the range is already significantly greater, several times higher. That's why such bombs, Russia constantly uses them on the front line. In fact, without strikes from such bombs, Russian local assaults, when infantry is thrown directly at Ukrainian fortifications, wouldn't be possible, yes, there. However many are killed, that's how many are killed, yes. That is, each time, sometimes on days of the most intense assaults, up to 150 of these bombs are dropped.
The new Ukrainian glide bomb is capable of striking fortifications, command posts, and other targets tens of kilometers away, deep into enemy territory. In other words, this is yet another tool for delivering precision strikes against the enemy without the need for aircraft to directly enter dangerous zones. The Ministry of Defense has already purchased the first batch of new aerial bombs. And that means the development is moving into the practical phase, and it may appear at the front in the near future.
Well, basically, it allows us to destroy any field fortifications. And to destroy, well, for example, to destroy depots. And this will be a tremendously significant advantage to our ground forces in successfully repelling and pushing back various Russian assaults. During our counterattacks, we will be able to use a very similar and highly effective tactical approach, a strike on Russian fortified positions. After that, our specialized drone units and forces eliminate those who survived with the help of drones. And the assault group captures these positions.
But Ukraine is not stopping there. Work on new long-range missiles is also underway in parallel. A European company, Destinos, together with the German concern Rheinmetall, is creating the Ruta Block 3 system, a missile with a range of up to 2,000 kilometers.
The new missile will have a warhead weighing 250 kilograms and a modern navigation system that will allow it to operate even under GPS signal jamming conditions. This is important in modern warfare, where electronic warfare systems have become one of the key factors. Its tests are to be conducted specifically in Ukraine. According to the plan, the first flight tests will begin in 2027.
The project is being developed simultaneously in several countries. The main engineering center of Destinos is already operating in the Netherlands. Germany will be responsible for mass production and certification, and Ukraine is responsible for testing, combat adaptation, and the production of certain key components.
70% of Russian major manufacturing enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex will be well within our strategic striking range. That means we will be able to effectively target and destroy not only facilities in the border regions and in Crimea, but also reach critical military targets a bit beyond the Urals.
Just a few years ago, Ukraine's defense sector mainly depended on old Soviet designs. Today, however, the country is creating its own high-tech solutions, from FPV drones and naval unmanned vehicles to aerial bombs and missiles.
Ukraine's indigenous weapons development has now become a vital cornerstone of its national defense strategy, showcasing a sophisticated and diverse array of domestically produced drones, missiles, and armored vehicles currently being deployed for the country's defense.
Are starting to attract the attention not only of the military, but also of international partners, because a significant portion of these systems has already been tested in real combat conditions. Thus, Ukraine is gradually becoming one of the key producers of modern weaponry in Europe.
That is all we have for you today, but very soon on Front News, you will see brand new and unique reports from our journalists in the very hottest spots of the ongoing war, gathered so that you can know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.